Hi everybody, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Welcome back to our vegetable garden in Spokane, Washington, where the hardiness zone ranges from 5B to 6A. I have been gardening a very long time and I have learned a lot of things through trial and error. Today I am going to share my top tips so that you can be a successful vegetable gardener without having to learn things the hard way. So let's get started because I've got a lot of information to share with you. If you are a brand new vegetable gardener, it's always easy to get carried away and plant a whole lot of things. But if you can't keep up with them or encounter some challenges, it's very easy to get discouraged and you think, oh, gardening is stupid, I don't want to do that. Well, I don't want you to have that kind of first experience. So what I recommend you do is just plant a few crops that first year, maybe zucchini, beans, and lettuce. See how they do. Learn what you can along the way, and then you're ready for that next year where you can hit the ground running. Don't feel like you need to figure out everything yourself and that you should know everything from the very start. You're not alone in this adventure. You're very welcome to ask me questions. You can ask a gardening friend or neighbor, or contact your local Master Gardener program. It is a free service that runs through the United States and Canada. And if you don't know how to contact them, just do a web search on the words Master Gardeners and then include the name of your county and your state or province. It's that simple, and they love to help. I've been a Master Gardener for 22 years now, and I just love solving mysteries. There are cool season crops and warm season crops, and you need to plant them at the right time. As you might guess, cool season crops are ones that thrive in cooler weather before the danger of frost is past, and they will grow into the season a bit, but when the temperatures get pretty warm, they will stop growing, set seed, and die. Examples of cool season crops would be things like lettuce, beets, Swiss chard, spinach, and so on. Warm season crops need to be planted after the danger of frost has passed. If you plant them too early and you have a frost, the plant probably will die, or it maybe will survive, but it just isn't going to perform well for you during the season. So how do you know when to plant them? Well, come on inside. I'm going to show you a free tool that's on my website, and it will give you a very good idea of when to plant things. You can find my website at susansinthegarden.com. Just go to the guides menu and go down a ways. You'll see seed starting, when to plant vegetables, all zones. So here's a chart. It's alphabetical by the name of the crop, and it tells you whether you would start something indoors ahead of time or outdoors and what the time frame is for either of those scenarios. So that should be a good help. Vegetable crops do their best if they're grown in a setting that has full sun, and that means at least 6 hours of sun daily. But that doesn't mean you can't grow vegetables because there are some alternatives. First of all, if you can create a garden space next to a bright wall, maybe the wall of your garage or an actual wall that's light, that can reflect extra light into your garden space. So consider that. Another idea is to grow vining types of vegetables, such as peas and beans, up on trellises, because the taller they grow, the more they're into that extra sunlight. But there are also vegetable crops that will do okay when grown in a semi-shady area. So let me give you a list of those. Beets, bok choy, broccoli, cabbage, carrots, celery, chard, Chinese cabbage, kale, kohlrabi, leeks, lettuce, mizuna, mustard, pak choy, scallions or green onions, spinach, and turnips. Be sure to plant your seeds and seedlings at the right spacing. You can find that information on the seed packets. If they're planted too closely together, the growth can be stunted, plus that makes it easier for insects and diseases to move from plant to plant. If you don't have many pollinators around, plant flowers. That is an easy solution, and a pretty one too. You'll also be interested to know that most beneficial insects require pollen and/or nectar during part of their life cycle. So that's an extra reason for planting flowers. Not that you needed one, right? Let's talk about bugs, because they are a part of a garden whether you like it or not. What you need to know first and foremost is that 99% of the insects that have been identified on the planet Earth are beneficial. So that means pollinators and predatory insects that will kill some of the pesky things that we get in our gardens. I want to make a plea that you use organic methods. Do not use chemical pesticides. So let me give you a good example of why you don't want to do that. First of all, let's say you have aphids in your garden and you think, oh, those darned aphids. You go to the home center or the garden center and you find a chemical pesticide that says on the label it will kill aphids. Yay, that's fantastic. Well, you go home, you spray the aphids, and sure enough, they die. And you're thinking, wow, I really took care of that problem. But what you don't know is that behind the scenes, the beneficial insects that would have controlled those aphids for you also were killed by that pesticide, because pesticides are non-selective. They don't know a good bug from a bad bug. So please use organic methods. If you need help identifying an insect, which is really the first step in knowing whether you even need to control them, please just send me an email with a photo showing me what the insect is. I will help you identify it, or talk to your local master gardeners. Let them help you identify the insect and give you options. But this is so important, you guys. I really, really want you to follow organic methods. It's not hard, it's not expensive. If you want your crops to do well, use the right fertilizers for them. I've been talking about this off and on this season because I really want everyone to understand which is the right fertilizer to use. So if you look at a package of fertilizer, it has 3 numbers on it, and they represent, in this order, the percentage of nitrogen, the percentage of phosphorus, and the percentage of potassium. So the first 2 numbers, in my mind as a vegetable gardener, are the very most important. If I'm growing something that I'm going to be harvesting the leaves from, so spinach, Swiss chard, lettuce, those types of things, I need to use a fertilizer that is high in nitrogen. So that means I want to find fertilizer that the first number is the highest. If I'm growing something like carrots, parsnips, beets, turnips, and so on, so root crops, I need a lot of phosphorus because phosphorus promotes that root growth. So I would look for a package of fertilizer where that middle number, which again represents phosphorus, is the highest. You also want a lot of phosphorus if you're growing plants that need to bloom and set fruit. So for example, winter squash, pumpkins, melons, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, all of those types of things where you're harvesting a fruit from them or harvesting that big root. So I hope that makes a lot of sense, because I get so many emails from folks saying, oh, my tomato plants are so green and lush, they look great, but they're not blooming and they're not giving me any fruits. And so I very politely say, what kind of fertilizer have you been using? And I'd say 99 times out of 100, it is a high nitrogen fertilizer. Well, nitrogen is good to get plants off to a good start, but then you need to switch them onto the appropriate fertilizer if they need to bloom and set fruit or form those big roots. You've heard me say this before, but your goal is to keep the soil lightly moist. Poke your finger into the soil to determine how much moisture is in it. The soil shouldn't feel super dry, and it shouldn't feel muddy either. The best time of day to water is in early morning. It's also a good idea to put a layer of mulch on the soil surface because that will help it retain its moisture longer. We use grass clippings because we don't use weed and feed or other types of herbicides, and that's really important. Take good care of your soil and it will in turn take good care of your plants. In the spring and fall, I like to add in some compost to the soil to add in some nutrients. I'm real careful about not disturbing the soil by digging deeply or turning it over because that disturbs the beneficial microorganisms within the soil. A lot of folks comment on how they never see weeds in our garden. Well, they're there, but for the most part, I can keep up with them. First of all, when I use the mulch, that impedes weed growth, so that's worth it right there. But if I'm walking along through the garden and I see a weed, I pull it right away because I know that they will multiply like crazy if I don't keep up with them. So why is it important to keep up? Well, weeds compete with our plants for moisture, nutrients, and space. They also can act as alternate hosts for different types of insects and diseases. So for me, that is very motivating to keep up with those weeds. And last but not least, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to use a garden journal. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, you can just use a notebook. But it's a great place to note what the weather was doing, when certain crops started producing for you and when they finished, any problems you may have encountered because that's how we learn. Maybe you have a friend or neighbor who has recommended a great new variety of some crop that you want to try. Jot it down because I always think I'm going to remember it, but I don't. So having a garden journal is what makes us better gardeners every year because we learn from all of that valuable information that we log inside it. I hope this information was helpful because I really want you to be successful at growing a garden. If you have any questions or encounter unusual problems, don't be bashful. Either write a question in the comments down below this video on YouTube, or send me an email. I've got my email address at the end of this video. Thanks so much for watching today, everybody. Happy gardening. Use the right fertilizers for your different crops. I've been harping on this a little bit this year, but it is, okay, I think I'm going in.